Australia, 2025. A nation rocked by one of the biggest organized crime takedowns in its history. Over 2.34 tons of cocaine, 268 kilograms of meth and ketamine, and millions in cash seized in a series of coordinated raids that shattered a billion-dollar drug empire. This wasn't chaos, it was corporate precision. Global cartels, encrypted networks, insider corruption, and young recruits chasing fast money. What began as a secret underworld business soon became Australia's most shocking criminal empire exposed. The empire, how they operated. Before we get into how police finally brought them down, you need to understand what these guys actually built. And honestly, it's shocking, not because it was sloppy or chaotic, but because it was structured, efficient, and calculated, almost like a legitimate business empire. This syndicate didn't just decide one day to start importing drugs. They built an entire operation from the ground up, complete with systems, layers, and backups. It worked like a multinational corporation, except their product wasn't tech or clothing. It was meth, cocaine, and ketamine. The supply chain genius. Here's where it gets wild. These criminals weren't using the typical backdoor smuggling tricks. They had figured out how to exploit legitimate trade routes, the same ones used by global companies every single day. Drugs were hidden in cargo shipments of footwear, plastic containers, even wooden pallets. Think about that. The next time you order something online, that pair of sneakers, or even your new chair could have been part of a smuggling route if police hadn't intervened. That's how deep this operation went, but they didn't stop at importation. Once the drugs hit Australian soil, they ran a domestic network that was just as smart. They used commercial flights with drug mules to move product between states, and even Australia Post, the National Postal Service, to ship smaller packages across the country. It was bold, almost reckless, using government mail to move illegal substances. And the money. It wasn't being hauled around in duffel bags. They moved millions through carefully designed channels, avoiding transaction thresholds that could trigger attention from financial watchdogs. It's like they didn't just study the rules of money laundering, they rewrote them, what they were actually moving. When police finally cracked into this operation, what they found was staggering. In Strikeforce Bloomfield, authorities seized 268 kilograms of illegal substances, including 150 kilograms of pseudoephedrine, a key ingredient used to make meth, along with amphetamines, 21 kilograms of ketamine, and 2 kilograms of cocaine. That pseudoephedrine number alone revealed something huge. This wasn't just a distribution group. They had the capacity to manufacture drugs locally. The total street value? Around 60 million. That's not a street gang, that's an empire. And this was just one operation. In October 2025, a separate bust in Sydney uncovered another 415 kilograms of drugs, 287 kilograms of methamphetamine, 81 kilograms of heroin, 47 kilograms of cocaine, and 838 grams of MDMA, worth roughly $260 million on the street. That confirmed one thing. Multiple large-scale networks were operating across Australia at the same time, and the scale didn't stop there. Back in December 2024, Australian authorities made history, seizing 234 tons of cocaine, valued at a jaw-dropping $760 million AUD. It was the biggest cocaine bust in Australian history, and its links to the Comanchero Outlaw Motorcycle Club showed just how deep international organized crime had embedded itself within Australia's borders. This wasn't just a syndicate, it was a shadow empire, built in plain sight, operating with corporate precision until it all came crashing down. Why Australia? The lucrative target. So why would huge international cartels pour resources into a country of just 28 million people? Simple, money. Australians pay some of the highest street prices in the world for drugs like cocaine and meth. The premium turns Australia into a gold mine. Small population, huge margins. It's exactly the kind of market that draws everyone from Southeast Asian triads to South American cartels. High demand, high prices, and geographic distance from supply chains means whoever can get product into Australia first makes enormous profits. Detective Superintendent John Watson put it bluntly about Strikeforce Bloomfield. The operation had global ties, and its reach extended across Australia from the west coast to the east coast. In other words, this wasn't a boutique ring. It was a major transnational organized crime group that decided Australia was worth serious investment. Cast of characters. Who they were. What surprised investigators was who filled the network. In the October 2025 Sydney bust, 2 of the arrested were just 26, and 1 was only 19. These weren't veteran kingpins with decades of criminal resumes. Some were young men lured by fast money, now facing charges that carry life sentences. All 3 were charged with supplying prohibited drugs in large commercial quantities, a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. That's the real cost of getting involved. Worse, corruption at the ports turned out to be a tipping point. In August 2025, Strikeforce Piporta exposed a frightening level of insider help at Sydney's docks. 3 dock workers were charged after being caught trying to retrieve cocaine worth $164 million from a shipping container. Surveillance shows the play-by-play. At 12:30 a.m. on August 31, 2025, a 38-year-old forklift driver deliberately shifted containers to access one unit. Minutes later, a 25-year-old entered the container armed with a crowbar, angle grinder, portable lights, and ear protection. Everything for breaking into a hidden compartment. Police found 506 tightly packed blocks of cocaine behind lead sheeting and a false wall. Investigators estimated that shipment could have been broken into 230,000 street deals. That level of inside help exposes a clear vulnerability. With thousands of containers and hundreds of workers, ports are a soft target if organized crime can place a few trusted people inside. The smuggling playbook, how they got it. In Understanding the Smuggling Methods explains why these takedowns mattered. Maritime routes and fishing vessels. For bulk quantities, maritime smuggling is the go-to. Networks use recreational fishing boats as pickup teams. In Operation Tirandor, investigators tracked a newly bought recreational boat that went out to sea, met a larger mothership loaded with cocaine, and returned to the Queensland coast. That operation eventually led to the seizure of 2.34 tons of cocaine. What makes this tactic effective is Australia's coastline, more than 35,000 kilometers, which is impossible to police entirely. Criminals pick remote beaches or small ports, drop the cargo, then recover it later through land networks. Places like Geraldton in Western Australia are favored precisely because they're isolated and lightly policed, with only small fishing communities nearby. That's the picture. A high-paying market, young recruits willing to take huge risks, insiders at critical choke points, and maritime routes that exploit Australia's geography. Together, those factors made the country an irresistible target until law enforcement began dismantling the networks. Hidden compartments and vehicle imports criminals are always adapting. And lately, they've turned vehicle imports into one of their smartest smuggling tools. The AFP has noticed a major rise in attempts to sneak drugs into Australia by hiding them inside imported cars, vans, and trucks. It's genius in a twisted way. Shiploads of vehicles are constantly arriving from overseas, all perfectly legitimate on paper. But what if, before those cars ever leave the source country, someone's paid to hide drugs inside the panels, under the seats, or deep within the frame? That's exactly what's happening. According to AFP intelligence, transnational crime groups are paying insiders to stash narcotics before the vehicles are loaded for export. In May 2024, during an inspection at Fremantle Harbor, officers discovered over $6.6 million worth of MDMA hidden inside the wall panels of 6 brand-new Peugeot vans. And to make sure their investment was safe, Syndicate had even installed GPS trackers inside the vehicles, letting them follow every move, from the ship's departure overseas to the van's arrival in Australia. The courier system. But not everything comes in through massive shipments. For smaller loads or high-end product, they use human couriers, drug mules. These are people who get on commercial flights with packages taped to their bodies or hidden in luggage. Some even take up jobs in courier services like Australia Post, using their inside access to quietly move parcels packed with drugs. It's old school and low-tech, but for small quantities that stay under the radar, it's frighteningly effective. The encrypted communication web of course, none of this works without secure communication. For years, law enforcement has been chasing an invisible digital underworld. built on encrypted phones and hidden networks. One of the most notorious systems was Phantom Secure, a modified BlackBerry service stripped of its camera, mic, and GPS, and fitted only with encrypted messaging software. Between 20,000 Phantom Secure devices sold worldwide, half ended up in Australia. That's 10,000 phones used by major organized crime figures to plan everything from multi-ton drug shipments to targeted hits. When Phantom Secure was eventually shut down, criminals quickly adapted. But this time, law enforcement was one step ahead. They rolled out Anum, a fake encrypted messaging app built as a trap. Criminals believed it was untraceable. They used it freely, sharing details about shipments, routes, payments, and even violence. All the while, police were watching every message. Live, the takedown. Strike Force, Bloomfield revealed, and then came the takedown, the part that would bring the entire empire crashing down. Between May and October 2025, detectives from NS Dulles Police's Drug and Firearms Squad, working alongside Western Australia Police and the Australian Federal Police, executed 30 coordinated search warrants across both states. It looked like a series of ordinary raids, but behind the scenes, it was months, maybe years of patient work. Investigators had tracked encrypted messages, followed money trails, built profiles, and mapped every layer of the Syndicate's operations. They ran controlled buys, gathered intel from informants, and even photographed suspects to understand daily routines. When the resolution phase began, police speak for the final strike. Timing was everything. Every raid had to hit at the exact same moment. If even one target escaped or destroyed evidence, the whole operation could collapse. So, before dawn, teams across New South Wales and Western Australia stood ready. Warrants signed, plans rehearsed, radios silent, until the signal came, and then it happened. In a matter of hours, the network that had taken years to build was gone. 18 people arrested, 268 kilograms of drugs seized, 14 firearms confiscated, nearly $400,000 in cash recovered, and all the equipment used to manufacture chemicals gone. But beyond the numbers, it was symbolic, a powerful message that no syndicate, no matter how global or sophisticated, could outrun the system forever. Detective Superintendent John Watson summed it up perfectly. We have taken their drugs, eliminated their workforce, seized their means of communication, and confiscated their cash. This operation had global ties, and significantly their reach extended across Australia from the west coast to the east coast. It was meticulously planned and executed, with drugs and money being moved across borders through domestic flights, drug couriers on planes, and also via Australia Post. This wasn't just a bust. It was Australia's biggest organized crime takedown, the kind that doesn't just make headlines. It shakes the entire underworld. The October 2025 Sydney bust, a separate beast-while Strike Force Bloomfield, was still unfolding. Another storm was brewing, one that would expose just how widespread Australia's drug problem had become. In October 2025, police carried out a completely separate operation that led to the seizure of 415 kilograms of drugs. Raids hit multiple properties across Mays Hill, Bankstown, Campsie, and Bonnyrigg Heights, all in Sydney's western suburbs, and what they uncovered painted a chilling picture of a city crawling with simultaneous drug networks. The details of the bust were wild. Inside safe houses, police found vacuum-sealed bricks of methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, and MDMA, all hidden inside duffel bags. But it was the branding that really caught attention. Some of the packages had a cartoon bear printed on them, the same Ted Bear from the Mark Wahlberg comedy. Others were stamped with red Chinese characters reading, "Smooth Sailing." It sounds almost ridiculous. Criminals treating drug distribution like a legitimate brand campaign. But it wasn't a joke. It showed how professional these operations had become, complete with packaging, labeling, and marketing. Yet, at the same time, it revealed a dangerous arrogance. You don't brand your product unless you believe you're too big to fail. They weren't. 3 men, aged 19, 25, and 26, were arrested and charged with supplying prohibited drugs in large commercial quantities. The older 2 faced potential life sentences, while the 19-year-old, despite his age, faced the same penalties. The court treats such massive quantities as serious federal offenses. No leniency, no excuses. Police also recovered 3 pistols, over 300 rounds of ammunition, and $450,000 in cash. These weren't just dealers. They were armed businessmen in a world where violence replaces contracts and guns settle disputes. The message was clear. These networks were organized, well-funded, and willing to protect their empire at any cost. The cocaine jackpot, Operation Tirandor, if 415 kilograms sounds huge. Operation Tirandor made it look like pocket change. This one was next level, a bust that would make international headlines. In December 2024, the AFP launched Operation Tirandor after receiving intelligence that a syndicate linked to the Comanchero Motorcycle Club was planning a major cocaine import into Australia. Detectives began tracking a newly purchased recreational fishing boat owned by a 35-year-old man. It looked innocent, the kind of boat you'd expect to see on a weekend trip. But investigators soon discovered the truth. It was about to become a key player in one of the biggest drug hauls in Australian history. Out at sea, the small fishing boat met up with a mothership, where roughly 2.34 tons of cocaine were transferred on board. The plan was simple: bring it quietly back to the Queensland coast and move it inland through their network. But fate had other ideas. The boat broke down 18 kilometers from shore. Dead in the water, its crew stranded with millions of dollars worth of cocaine. Before they could recover, law enforcement swooped in. The takedown was perfectly timed, straight out of a crime thriller. 13 people were arrested, 11 adult men and 2 juveniles, and the seized cocaine had an estimated street value of $760 million AUD at $494 million USD. To put that in perspective, if that shipment had made it to the streets, it could have been broken into 11.7 million individual deals. That's enough for nearly half of Australia's population to buy a dose. Among those arrested was the vice president of the Comanchero Motorcycle Club's Brisbane chapter. A major revelation that confirmed long-held suspicions. Outlaw motorcycle gangs in Australia weren't just running local operations or controlling turf. They were working directly with South American cartels, bridging continents through a dark alliance of money, drugs, and power. These busts, from Sydney's suburban safe houses to a stranded fishing boat off the Queensland coast, showed the true scale of what police were up against. It wasn't just one syndicate. It was an entire ecosystem of organized crime, running parallel to everyday Australia until the takedowns began closing in. Technology angle, encrypted communications view. Of the most fascinating sides of this entire story is how technology has changed the way drug syndicates operate. Gone are the days when criminals made phone calls or used burner phones. Now, they've become incredibly smart, using encrypted messaging systems built specifically for illegal business. They know law enforcement is watching, so they've taken their operations deep underground, into digital shadows where they think they can't be touched. But what police pulled off with the ANOM operation was nothing short of genius. Instead of trying to hack into encrypted systems, something nearly impossible, they flipped the script. They built their own fake encrypted app and let the criminals come to them, and it worked perfectly. The moment a few high-profile traffickers endorsed the platform, word spread fast across the underworld. Within weeks, thousands of criminals were using it, confidently exchanging messages about drug shipments, payments, and hits, not realizing every single text was being read by the police in real time. It wasn't just a tech breakthrough, it was psychological warfare. The genius was in understanding one basic truth: criminals trust other criminals more than they trust anyone else. Once that trust was exploited, the app became the perfect trap. Millions of messages later, the biggest names in organized crime had unknowingly handed law enforcement the evidence they needed. Of course, that didn't end the game. Every time one encrypted network is exposed, another takes its place. Criminal groups simply migrate, finding new systems, new tools, and new codes. It's a constant cycle. Law enforcement infiltrates one, criminals move to another. The chase never stops. The success and the struggle. Where we stand. The takedowns in 2025 were massive wins for law enforcement. Strikeforce Bloomfield wiped out an entire national drug syndicate. The port worker investigation shut down key smuggling routes, and international operations like Ironside exposed just how global these networks have become. But let's be real, this war is far from over. For every operation dismantled, there are a few others quietly rising. The drug trade in Australia is too profitable to ever completely disappear. Prices remain some of the highest in the world, meaning the temptation for traffickers is just as strong as ever. That's why police have shifted their strategy. They're no longer trying to stop every drug from entering the country. That's impossible. Instead, they're targeting the biggest fish, large-scale importers, violent syndicates, and networks with direct links to global cartels. Their goal isn't just to seize drugs. It's to dismantle entire supply chains and make it harder, riskier, and costlier for organized crime to operate. Detective Superintendent John Watson summed it up best when he said, "We have thoroughly dismantled this operation, rendered them inactive. We have taken their drugs, eliminated their workforce, seized their means of communication, and confiscated their cash. But there will be others. There always are."
Conclusion. The battle continues. The story of Australia's biggest drug syndicate takedown isn't just about one bust. It's about a much larger war. A war fought between law enforcement and networks that are smart, global, and constantly adapting. These syndicates aren't just moving drugs. They're recruiting insiders, exploiting legitimate industries, and partnering with some of the most dangerous cartels on the planet. But police are fighting back with equal precision. They're learning to think like criminals. They're going undercover in digital spaces, tracking encrypted messages, mapping smuggling routes, and taking down operations from the inside out. The November 2025 Strikeforce Bloomfield bust wasn't just another drug seizure. It was a message. 18 criminals behind bars, 268 kilograms of drugs off the streets, millions in cash seized, and a supply chain that once felt untouchable, now completely dismantled. Yet, even as one case closes, another begins. Somewhere in an office, detectives are already piecing together the next investigation, watching, listening, waiting, because this war doesn't end with one victory. It's an ongoing fight to protect a country constantly under threat from the lure of easy money and deadly drugs. And while the criminals evolve, so do the police. Each takedown makes the next one a little easier and the cost of doing business a little higher. That's what truly matters, because every seizure, every arrest, every busted syndicate means fewer lives destroyed, fewer families broken, and fewer communities poisoned by the fallout of organized crime. In the end, the message is clear. Crime might hide in the shadows, but law enforcement is always right behind it, ready to strike.